the complexity and the unpredictability of life, which is something that really, as a teenager, you're very interested in, and at the same time, you're very afraid of. I think I deal with them in a different way. I think I still sort of wish or long for simplicity and transparency, and I think your song is very much about that also. Learn to accept the complexities of life and the beauty that comes with complexity and not having control. Because as much as I might want to think of myself back when I was a teenager and maybe of my inner teenager as someone who learned how to let go, it's something that you don't really completely learn ever, I think.
That was Vicente Amorim discussing the song Infinite Light, which Liz Hennelin and I wrote after being inspired by Psalm 36. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is the Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms or Tehillim inspire in my guests. Vicente is a director and showrunner whose work hops borders and genres. He's done 10 features and 10 TV series, and along the way he's worked with some of the greats like Wagner Moura, Viggo Mortensen, Harvey Keitel, Emily Mortimer, and more. Most recently, he directed Netflix's most ambitious series in Latin America, Senna, and the series Santo in Spain, picking up major awards along the way. Look for his upcoming project, Man on Fire and the World Jones Made, as early as 2026. His work ranges from thrillers and action to dark comedies and character dramas, and his films have screened at festivals from Toronto to Berlin and at MoMA in New York. He grew up all over the world as the son of a diplomat, speaks 4 languages, and now lives in Los Angeles with his family. Most important, Vicente is not only a client, but a friend. You can find out more about Vicente by going to his website, www.vicente, that's Vicente, Amorim, AMORIM.com. Vicente and I will be talking about the profound connections between music, personal growth, and storytelling, how hard rock can evoke your inner teenager, the importance of embracing both responsibility and a sense of playfulness in parenting, the fallibility of parents, being a romantic, storytelling to help transcend cultural boundaries and connect people, how children learn simply from observing their parents, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to Infinite Light.
Someone said, by your light, we see light.
Have you done one? You've done a lot of interviews before.
I've done interviews, but always about usually my work.
Right.
So this is the first time I'm going to talk about something. So in a way, which is really your stuff and is also kind of free form. So
thank you for joining me in this conversation. So to remind you, I'm going to ask you one question and one question only. In the same way that I was inspired by the Tehillim, the Psalms, to write this song called Infinite Light, I'm hoping that it inspired something in you, questions, curiosity, loathing even, whatever it was. What inspiration did it create in you, and what do you want to talk about?
A couple of months ago when you told me about this and you asked what kind of music interested me, I tried to be as truthful as possible. And I told you that really, I mean, my taste is very eclectic and I like all different kinds of music. But then you told me what was in your quiver and all the different styles you had and the different kinds of songs that you were working on, and I chose hard rock. And I caught myself thinking, why did I choose hard rock? Because it's not something I even listen to that much nowadays. And having listened to the song and having thought about it, what makes it's interesting, because I think the reason why I chose the style of music has very much to do with the effect it had on me. And which is, hard rock puts me in contact with my inner teenager.
So did this song have that effect on you?
It did very much. And it's interesting because I was talking to my wife and daughters the other day, like I think actually yesterday or the day before. It was Olivia's birthday on the 19th.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. And I was clowning around. I can't remember what I was doing. I was teasing her or something. And my wife said, "Oh, you're such a teenager sometimes." And then my older daughter, Alice, said, "He's a teenager all of the time." And that made me pause for a second. And I thought, well, am I? Maybe I am. And why is that so? Because I see myself, obviously, as a very mature, responsible, and Cartesian, even professional. But I guess that's not really totally true. And that this has a little bit of a connection to stuff we talked about over the dinner we had also like a month ago or so, and about sort of letting go and about how overthink certain things. You don't take as many risks. So I guess actually there's an inner teenager that I keep alive, not consciously, but I guess it is true. And that has to do a lot with the song you sent me. It has to do, like, I guess, with the romantic part of myself and with the echoes of like William Blake, Milton, and Yeats that are in the song. Seriously, which is stuff which was very, very dear to me when I saw myself as a poet, which I am probably not at all. Well, I maybe, whatever, 40 years ago. So it was very interesting. It was very rewarding and not totally easy to be in contact with that feeling and to think about it. I mean, the Shelley of it all, the Poe of it all.
Do you still read any of those authors today?
Very little, but I read them a lot back in the day.
Did you have a favorite among them?
Back then, probably Blake, I think.
You know, I'm still stuck on Songs of Innocence and Experience.
Exactly. And it has a lot to do also with a phase of my life where I was in high school and I lived in the Netherlands, and high school, the Netherlands, the 80s. I mean, you fill in the blanks. But it was a very important part of my life. And it was a part of my life where I discovered very, very much about me. And I guess things about myself that I try to keep alive, even unconsciously, and like and it goes from like, whatever, teasing my daughters to I guess, feeling romantic about stuff, not romantic in the literary sense, but also about life and love and everything and spleen and all that. And I mean, the complexity and the unpredictability of life, which is something that really, I guess, as a teenager, you're very interested in, and at the same time, you're very afraid of.
Mm-hmm. Do you still have some of the same fears today that you did as a teenager?
I probably do, but I think I deal with them in a different way. I think I still sort of wish or long for simplicity and transparency. And I think your song is very much about that also. But I've learned to accept the complexities of life and the beauty that comes with complexity and not having control. Because as much as I might want to think of myself back when I was a teenager and maybe of my inner teenager as someone who learned how to let go. It's something that you don't really, really completely learn ever, I think.
Well, but it sounds like I think you ride a line, or this is one of my favorite phrases, you manage a polarity. You have to hold both the letting go, and you have to be so controlled. That's true in your role as parent. That's true in your role as writer and director. Because if you just let go and just vomit it on the page or on the screen, it's possible that people would want to watch it, but no one would understand it, except those perhaps who know you most closely. So you have to hold both the letting go and the containing in a way that allows you to communicate with your daughters, with your wife, with your closest friends, and of course with your audience. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's the struggle to find clarity in a chaotic world and to use chaos as a kernel for something that makes sense, or to try to find sense in chaos. I think, in a way, all stories and all the syntax we try, the syntax itself is, the mean is the message,
right?
Right? Is about looking at what is offered to you and trying to streamline it in a way where what really matters to you will get across to an audience when it comes to telling a story, which is really what my job is. I'm a storyteller. I'm more of I see myself more as a storyteller than as an author. I guess there was time, probably when I was a teenager, where I saw myself more as an author, and I didn't really understand what a storyteller was. Then I realized that I preferred to tell stories and to make sense of those stories than to birth them, although those things go together. This is all maybe sounds all a bit esoteric, but it's really how I felt. It's what resonated with me when I heard the song. And I think it has to do with the fact that I chose heavy metal. And I think it's why I try, even unconsciously, to keep this inner teenager alive, because it challenges me.
Challenges you in a productive way, or does it get in the way sometimes?
Well, both. Certainly both. But I think more in a productive way than otherwise. Because as a storyteller, and with the responsibility I have as a storyteller, especially on the very big projects that I have been involved in lately, if there is a temptation to basically streamline everything. And if you do that, there's no fun left. You suck out the everything. And I think that inner teenager, the one that's looking for duality and duality of light and darkness, and is sort of scared but interested in chaos, is what will look at a scene, at a line, at a character, and go, you know what? You are just too square. Let's make it, into something a little more interesting. Let's Let's not go down the beaten path. Let's not take shortcuts. Let's let this meander also, because by meandering, you might find within the story you're telling beauty. And this ties into the romantic aspect, my inner teenager.
Sure, sure. Do you find that your daughters relate to that inner teenager more or to your dadliness more?
I think they relate to my dadliness more because I try to be able to let him be in control most of the time. He's in charge, but they find the teenager interesting or intriguing at least. And they sort of know this teenager in me. And I think that's a good thing because they also understand that there's more to life than just like rules and even caring, which is so wonderful and is what I do probably best in very many different senses. But there's got to be a little bit of irresponsibility and obviously in a controlled environment, but of exploration and not being quite sure what to do and how to do it. But at the same time, having the right answers and setting the right boundaries whenever necessary. I'm not saying I do it well all the time, but I try to be conscious of that.
Is there a time you feel like your inner teenager got in the way with your daughters or even with your wife?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. And this comes through as frustration, as being selfish. One thing I think I learned, if anything, about life is that you transition from me to us. And sometimes our ego gets the best of us. And that has a lot to do with, in my case, what I would call my inner teenager. And I think they have seen that happen in good ways, but also in pretty bad ways. I mean, not in ways that are either selfish or confusing or send mixed messages. Hopefully that hasn't happened too much, but I'm sure it has happened. But then again, it's like I was saying, I think it's important that, or I feel it important that my children see that, their parents are only human and that they make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important because, but I remember thinking back to myself as a teenager, I think that's sort of when I realized my parents were not infallible. Because before that, I actually thought so. That in general, or more than in general, that they were infallible. Pretty perfect parents, that there was a very clear division. Part of it may be linked to systemic sexism and the other gender roles and culture back in the 70s and 80s, especially.
The 70s and 80s in Amsterdam?
No, all over the world. My dad's a diplomat, so I was brought up here in the States, in England. I was born in Austria, then we moved back to Brazil and then to the Netherlands. So the Netherlands would be my late teen years. And that's in the Netherlands is when I think I realized that my parents were not infallible. And I tried to make sure to show to my daughters, if not directly, indirectly, that I am fallible and that I'll have opinions about things, that I might not have answers. We'll have more opinions than answers, especially if we're not talking about science.
Your strategy in kind of raising your daughters is what I would call the righteous but the hardest path. Because if you raise your kids as if you are the oracle that knows all things and you are, in fact, infallible, then there's a certainty that your kids are raised with, that you're directing them in a particular direction and, you want them to behave in particular ways and to act in certain ways and to do their homework and eat their peas or Brussels sprouts or whatever, because you're infallible. You know what's right. The moment you let go of that mask that so many parents had, at least certainly when I was growing up, we're not that far apart. I think that the moment you let go of that, you create a question mark for your kids. Is my dad or your mom or even a sibling sometimes telling me something that's true, something I can rely upon. And I actually think that's a good thing, because even the most reliable people in your life can sometimes disappoint you.
Oh, yeah.
So you're training your kids to learn the subtle differences between truth, demand, and recommendation. And, sometimes you can be explicit about it, sometimes you can't. But, obviously, when you raise kids who have an openness to life and a recognition that not everything is perfect or certain, they have the potential to be, in my opinion, they have more resilience. Like it's a dirty word, I think. There was a time where, everyone was focused on, what was the Wendy Mogul book, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. It talks about resilience, and it's good. It's also overrated in some respects. But I think that allowing for your fallibility from an early age will, in the long run, do them a good service.
Hopefully. It's not like a textbook thing. Of course, it has to do, I guess, somewhat with the way I was brought up. It has a lot to do with mistakes I've made. I think there's something also about just the dynamics between myself and my wife and how we try to go about things, which isn't, most of the time is fun and pretty calm, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's rough, like in any marriage. I want to say it's intuitive, but in the sense where intuition isn't something esoteric, but rather the combination of intelligence and experience. It has to do with everything I've read, watched, paid attention to, talking to people like yourself, and listening and trying to understand what makes sense for me. Things don't always work the same way for everybody. I don't think there is a playbook there's not like one size fits all for those kinds of things. And it's interesting that we're talking about how I raise my kids, because to me, your song is a lot also about a desire for straightforward signs about what is good and what is evil, what's harmful, what is not, which is stuff that as a kid you'd like to know. But please tell me what's right.
As an adult, I want to know it.
Exactly.
Right? If you think about our business, right? And I'm sure this is as true on the creative side as it is on the legal and business affairs side. You're having a conversation with a creative executive or a business affairs executive, and they say X. Oh, we want to make this movie. Do they really want to make the movie, or are they just being nice? Do they really want to make the movie, or are they saying they want to make the movie if list 1,000 conditions? But, people do not communicate the way lawyers do, because we would get nothing done. The song talks about, the deceitful, the true liars. And there are people who out and out lie. I've met them. I've done business with them. And they are the most maddening people to deal with, because you say you have to choose between black or white. They choose black. When they come back and the deal summary says white, and you're like, what? I don't understand. You said black. My notes say that you said black. And, I can think of specific examples where we agreed to a particular type of contingent compensation, and it's the more favorable one. They agreed. I have it in writing, and then the paperwork says no. I don't understand how people like that live with themselves. But that said, I think that they are gladiating. They're doing what's right because they're zealously protecting their company, and they don't care about the fact that I, on the receiving end, am experiencing them as just a liar. And I'm sure the same thing is true on the creative end. It doesn't work exactly the same way. You work your heart out and write a script or direct a film and deliver the scenes the way you said you were going to. And then they come back to you and say, this isn't what I wanted. I want X, Y, and Z. And you're like scratching your head. And again, I'm telling tales from other clients of mine who've delivered exactly what the executives asked for. And then the executive said, we're going to pass. But this is what you asked for. Why didn't you tell me you wanted this other thing?
It's so interesting and it's so crazy. And it has, again, to do with your song, with the frustration about how just the nature of life is so unpredictable. like you say, if only things were simple, right?
Right.
But they're not. There's so many different ways to gauge that. You will try to tell an actor without mimicking what you mean, because that's the worst way to do it, what a scene is about and what kind of delivery you expect from that scene and that situation, aside from all the physical direction you might give him, or the traffic direction, as I call it. And some actors will take that in and will give you back something absolutely unexpected and beautiful. And you'll just go, oh my God, I don't even think I asked for this, but this is so much better than I did. And sometimes it's just like cardboard. It's like there's nothing there. And doesn't matter how hard you try to explain what you want, nothing happens. Then you really have to rely, in our business, on editing and what are you cutting it with and how long the take lasts in the final cut and what music you put to it and whatever.
Sure.
And if only things were simple, but they're not. They're not.
You talked about romantic, and you used romantic in two different senses. Romantic qua Shelley and Blake, and romantic qua the romance you have with your wife, Anne. Because they're different things, explain your understanding of the two different types of romantic, and talk to me about how each may influence your interactions with your loved ones and your audience.
The first romantic you mentioned, the one Shelley, Yeats, Blake, whatnot, romantic in the literary sense, has a lot to do with obviously what they called spleen, this search for this inner meaning for life that you never really achieve ever, but that you have to keep looking for. Otherwise, life just doesn't make sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it very often it feels naive, and I don't mind that. I think that's the way it should be, because there's sort of a purity in that it's not like it's unsullen or anything, but it grounds you with feelings that are very simple and very hard to explain at the same time. It's like, why are you alive? Why do you care? Why keep going? And sometimes you're questioning that by being romantic. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Life doesn't make sense.
Right.
And obviously so many of these poets died very young and tragic deaths and so on and so forth. And so much of hard rock and heavy metal has echoes of that, sometimes in a very simplistic and silly way, but sometimes in a very profound way, like in the song we're discussing. There's an inner joy, like some sort of flame burning inside. And I know this sounds so corny, that literary romantic aspect of my life, of the way I look at things and the way I appreciate songs, books, and films, and just sometimes nature, keeps me going and makes me, in the end, it's bittersweet, but the result is very satisfying. It's like, okay, this is something I like. This is something I can relate to. This is who I am. This also throws me back to an essence of myself that I don't want to be lost with by getting hardened by life and by my job and by responsibility and deadlines and money and bringing up children and looking at your investments in the bank and whatnot. None of that makes sense. None of that actually matters. It separates what really matters. It gives the romantic, the literary romantic definition is, I think, what gives me perspective on life.
It sounds like it serves as a bit of an anchor.
Yes, as an anchor, and it's something that, gives me like hindsight and did this make sense? Did all of this make sense? Why keep going? It's because of this. It's not so much because money and all the rest. That's just a means to an end.
Right.
Whereas the romantic aspect of like relationships, like the relationship I have with my wife, is a lot more tangible. I mean, it is and it's not. Of course, I mean, what is love? If anybody needed the answer, all of you poets would be out of a job. But there is a moment in life where you feel like, okay, this is love. And of course, you can be heartbroken and you can restart and find love again. And I'm sure that it has happened to me, as I'm sure it's happened to many, many other people, but it exists. It might be for fleeting moments and it might be for a long, long time. And I think the kind of romantic relationship I have with my wife is something that also grounds me, that is also an anchor, that also keeps me going and that gives me perspective in life. Okay, this makes sense. This is why I do everything else. Right. And in that sense, of course, the two romantic definitions come together.
I also want to note that I used the word anchor because I think you were like, the way you were expressing it, it sounded like it was grounding you. And obviously your relationship with your wife also grounds you. But, and this is the fascinating thing about romance, either capital R or not, that groundedness is what allows you to take flight and what allows you to bring your inner teenager to bear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you can't teach to your kids or to writing students or songwriting students. It's something that all you can do is model it. You can explain it, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't teach it. People have to see that and find the groundedness, whether it comes from reading your favorite poets, we've talked about Yeats and Blake, but, you might be reading Maya Angelou. You might be reading Jack Kerouac. You might be reading Amos Oz if you read Israeli poets. Whoever it is, or in my case, I love to read the psalmist, whether it was David or not, I don't care. Not that I can relate to all of it, because some of it I just like, ick. And that's true whether I'm reading the psalmists or I'm reading the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I read more lyricists. Lyricists are poets, sort of. There's two basic flavors of poetry. There's the structured rhymed poets. You can think of Milton and Donne and Herrick with very clear rhyme schemes and meters, and everything falls into that structure. Or it can even be some more modern people or even later people where you're doing things like a sestina, where it's not rhymey, but there's a very specific structure. On the other hand, you also have the poets who eschew structure and tell a story through the words on the page or the words the spoken word. In fact, I would argue that many spoken words are poets, even if they don't identify themselves that way. When you take lyrics, you've got to deal with those same issues. Am I rhyming? How does it look on the page? How does it sound coming out? But you also have to then combine it with a melody. And once you do that, it's not that it's more complex, but it's another factor to consider. And I think most lyricists will end up making different choices by virtue of making things more singable than you would if you were simply just putting something on the page to be read aloud or not. This is a good time to mention that I co-wrote this song with Liz Hanlon, who is a fabulous poet. This is a song that we wrote together as part of something that we do a few times a year called Fearless Songwriting. Liz and I have debated healthily whether we are going to make a poet's choice on a particular lyric or we're going to make a lyricist choice on a particular set of lyrics. I think this one, I think it's easy to see that we made lyricist choices. And I think some of that comes out in the decision to have it be as rhymey as it is. simple, deceitful, label, evil. You have half rhymes, but they rhyme. It's too loud, can't handle the crowd. It's too bright, turn off a light. Sleep, sheep, more, chore. It's very rhymey, specifically because the subject matter's so freaking heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I've played in spoken word bands. I've played in funk bands, blues. I've tried to play something that's jazz-like, but I don't know that I achieved that. I've played in Jewish bands, and I've played in cross-communal bands that had influences from the Middle East and South America and, heavy-duty rock and roll. My musical taste is all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But the common theme in all of this is, and I think I see this in your directing, what I've seen so far. If you're going to explore something that's heavy and that can be powerful and have a deep impact on someone, you want to do it in a way that's packageable.
What I was thinking about listening to you, and this feels like one of those breakthroughs you have in therapy, which is a lot what this feels like in a very, very good way. I think recently, and when I say recently, I mean in the past 6 years or so, I have geared my choices, my career choices, into picking projects, looking for projects, and developing projects that come to me in a way where they connect to my inner teenager. In a way that I didn't used to do when I started. And I think it has to do with the fact that I wanted to outgrow that teenager, and now I accept him.
Wow. That's very powerful. So when you think about that teenager, I do inner child work a lot. And depending on what I'm exploring, I will think of Sheppy from Israel, Sheppy from high school. Where were you at this time? What were you wearing?
It's me wearing a black t-shirt, super worn and sort of teared, walking around The Hague when I was probably 16 or 17. And feeling like anything was possible, but very difficult at the same time.
Mm-hmm, sure.
I'm writing for that kid, the kid that went to the bookstores and looked at the graphic novels, that watched very intellectual, auteurish movies and read all kinds of poetry and literature, but actually really, really liked genre, who wanted to grow up and become something very serious, or thought that he wanted to grow up and become something very serious, but found out finally after a few decades that you can be very serious. You can send your message across to lots of people all over the world in many different cultures and have fun doing that at the same time.
So this reminds me of one of my favorite stories. So there's a famous, well, probably not famous outside of the Jewish community, but in the Hasidic community, there's a famous rabbi called the Kutzker. I speak about him as if he's still alive, but I think he lived in the 1700s. And he was all about truth. The Kutzker, when it came time to make a hard decision, he would put his hands in his pockets and he would pull out a paper from the right pocket and a paper from the left pocket. And, he'd study them. And then he'd make a decision. And his students would ask him, Rebbe, what are you doing? And he explained, I have these 2 pieces of paper and I consult them. It helps me make my decisions. On the right hand, it says the world was created for me. That's our teenager, right? And in the other hand, it says, I'm not but dust of the earth. The Hebrew is ani rak afar va'efer. And so the students said, well, how do you know which one to look at? And the Kutzker says, that's the big challenge of life. It comes in the context of the Kutzker was a student, I think, of the Peshishcher, and a line of Hasidim that were focused on truth more than any other value. It's that exploration of that tension between your teenager and your serious adult who sees what's coming. In my 60s, my parents are no longer with us. My I have friends who are ill. I have friends who've died. In my high school, it was a big drama when a young man died, but that was not the norm. It was older people who died. And so if you have that recognition of an impending death, it reminds you on some level, you know what? I'm just like every other person. We as a race, theologically, the human race, theologically, not scientifically, were created out of the dust of the earth. I'm lowborn and I will remain lowborn. I need to hold both of these things in my heart. And I think that that's the challenge you have as a filmmaker, and that I think that we have as parents. And when do you bring the teenager to bear? When do you bring your kind of somber, serious self to bear? Because that's what needs to happen. That you can tell serious tales with fun. That's the optimum scenario.
It's been, and it will continue to be, because this is going to stay with me, very insightful.
Thank you for doing this. This is great. I love talking to you. You're so smart, so tempered, and I love that you present in this very professorial way, but yet what drives you is fun. So that's a beautiful thing. May you know a lot of fun on your own with Anne and with your lovely daughters. Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Vicente for joining me, to Liz Hanlon for co-writing Infinite Light with me, to Emil Stern for his help in producing this episode, to E-Rose for his help producing the song in this episode, to Jessica Hanna-Sweetler for her help on social media, to Liat Silvera for designing the podcast logo, and to my wife Shari, who is everything to me. You can find Infinite Light and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I'll be talking with my friend and mentor, Rabbi Steve Greenberg, the founding director of ASHEL, a North American support, education, and advocacy organization for LGBTQ+ Orthodox Jews and their families. We discuss sea monsters, different types of prayer experiences, making necessary improvements today for the benefit of future generation, linear time, circular time, and slinky time. The difference between sailing on the ocean and a river, inviting strangers to your home, stories to help us understand each other, and so much more, all inspired by Steve's thoughts after listening to Like Sailors, which I wrote with Liz Hanlon and was inspired by Psalm 148. Please join us.